Welcome back. All right, so news of the day video for all you fine people for your Sunday, March the 26th, as we get set for some hockey starting in about half an hour's time from when I'm recording this. So Blake Lizotte has a hearing today for a cross check on Josh Morrissey. Not surprised. I'm guessing 1, 2 games. No idea. Um, one, two. You guys can let me know your guess because why not? So the Department of Player Safety has been handing out suspensions lately. There's the debate about which ones they're not suspending, which ones are, how long they are, and all that fun stuff. I really think we need some kind of a standardized system. I don't know. But I look forward to this one being announced, and immediately the entire comments being, "What about? What about? What about? What about?" Because that's what happens, and that's just reality in the National Hockey League now. And we'll see if the NHL decides at some point to change how the system works or any of that. But at this point, it is what it is. Now with the LA Kings in general, their last 11 game point streak, which is what they have now after that win yesterday. The last time they had one was 2014. They won the Stanley Cup that year. So this is a team that's put themselves into some pretty heady territory here, and the expectations will just keep going up for the Kings. Of course, I just did a video on the Devils this morning. The Devils, there's pretty high expectations. I feel like this is a really wide open field when it comes to the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I think that's great. I think you can make an argument for a lot of teams as potentially Stanley Cup champions this year, and that's something that I think the NHL was going for when they brought in the system with the salary cap, and when they changed the systems around the draft and all that. I think it was really with the idea of creating a scenario where the parity's there, and whether we believe or don't believe in the parity is up to us, but that it's there, right? So yeah, all the best to the Kings and all that. Although Lizotte's probably gonna be out for a bit. Yeah, that was a pretty public incident, and Josh Morrissey, a pretty popular player who may very well win himself a Norris Trophy this year. So Boston wins their seventh division title last night. That's since 2003. Not overall. Overall, they've got more division titles than that. But when you look at the list of teams with more than that, the only team with more is Washington, and the only team with just as many, Detroit and Vancouver. Interestingly enough, all three of those teams below the playoff line. Detroit's been in a rebuild for a while. Vancouver has been mired in mediocrity for a while. Washington now below the playoff line. Looks like they're not going to make the playoffs. Boston, number one in the league. So Boston, it's been sustainable. We'll see for how much longer. There were plenty, myself included, expecting them to drop a bit this year. that didn't happen. Have I ever been happier to be wrong about something? No. At any rate, yeah, Boston, their seventh division title, and we know the pressure is going to be on them come playoff time. And again, playoff time, everything resets. No idea what's going to happen once the playoffs start. I'm just enjoying the ride during the regular season. Patrick Kane reached the 20-goal mark. For U.S.-born players, he is the third to have 15 or more 20-goal seasons. Mike Modano, 16 of them. Keith Tkachuk, 15 of them. No idea why Keith Tkachuk isn't in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Absolutely belongs in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's one of those weird omissions. There are a few, but Keith Tkachuk is definitely one of them. And yeah, so Patrick Kane, who will be in the Hall of Fame. There's no way he's going to be an admission. He has 15, 20-goal seasons now, and of course he's a free agent this summer. So if he plays well with the Rangers from here, and if they go on a bit of a run, that would put his price up, you would think, over the summer. He's not going to make the $10.5 million again, but again, if he can show that he can be useful, top six forward to a contending team, there'll be teams making offers this summer, or maybe the Rangers figure out a way to keep him, right? So at any rate, kudos to Kane on 15 seasons of 20 goals or more. It is Whalers night tonight in Carolina. So they've embraced this all over their social media, and it's a debate we've had, and we're going to have it again because it's against Boston. And it feels like when they do this, it's always against Boston, and I get it. You know, that's your other team out of New England. Sorry for the noise. That was the rabbit figuring out a bag that has something for her in it, so I have to move the bag until after the video's done. Whalers night tonight against Boston, and it feels kind of like trolling at this point. So was it 2 or 3 years ago now that Jack Edwards complained about the numbers that are being worn by these Carolina Hurricanes players, their Whaler numbers, and so they shouldn't be wearing the numbers that the old Whalers wore that were retired by Hartford? Carolina doesn't recognize the numbers retired by Hartford. I don't think it's a big deal, but I do expect that complaint to come up again. Anybody wearing a number tonight that was retired by the previous Hartford Whalers, will probably be complained about by Jack Edwards. And usually on a day where there's not that many games on, usually the feed that I have access to is Sportsnet, which will usually have the Nesson broadcast instead of Bally's. So I will probably have Jack Edwards to listen to on that one. But the discussion point too is this, because there's always going to be people saying bring back the Whalers. They're not going to go back to Hartford. The NHL will not go back to Hartford. Whether they should or shouldn't, whole other debate, but they're not going to. So the options are one of two. Either the Whalers become another team from the distant past that's kind of forgotten, like Kansas City, like Cleveland, or you have the team wear these jerseys and you celebrate that past history, as past histories of teams like Kansas City and Cleveland should be celebrated as well, even though the NHL was only in Kansas City and Cleveland for 2 years each. Of course, they were in Hartford for much longer. But I don't have a problem with Whalers night. I know it threw me off a bit the first time they wore Whalers jerseys, but now, they do need pucky on the shoulders, though. The Adidas do not have pucky on the shoulders, and that to me seems wrong. Even though the actual NHL team only had pucky on the shoulders for, I think, just their first year. First year or two, that's it. So while I remember them as having the whale on the shoulder, he wasn't there that long. Love to have a pucky plush, though. That'd be great. At any rate, Whalers night tonight in Carolina. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think that Carolina should be celebrating the Whalers, or they shouldn't touch it because, that's not their, I mean, it's their history that's where the franchise was, but, that should be for Hartford, and, have an exhibition game in Hartford. I'd be all over the idea of an exhibition game in Hartford with the wearing Whaler jerseys, although that would kind of feel like a tease as well. At any rate, let me know your thoughts. I want to give a little bit of a shout out to Raphael Harvey-Pinard and to Montreal management. He's drafted 201st overall in 2019. Last night he had 3 goals. I think he only had 3 shots. So 29 games this year, 12 goals, 5 assists, 17 points. And next year we will see, with changes Montreal makes between now and next season, what kind of a role he has and whether or not these are sustainable numbers. Now, because he's played 29 games, he won't be eligible for the Calder next year, but I don't think that's a big deal. I think that Harvey-Pinard has really become a legit top 6 forward for Montreal if these numbers keep up. And again, being a number 201 pick in 2019, that tells you that they have a pretty good system when it comes to finding players. And this is the important thing. The important thing isn't just your first round draft picks. So it's not just, well, who did you get first, second, third, fourth overall? It's how well did you draft outside the first round? And so teams that build themselves up and end up being contenders, very often you will find players who were drafted late. Tampa Bay has been praised plenty for late draft picks that have been bloomers over the last 10 years. And then Detroit in the generation before that. How many late bloomers did we have that were late round draft picks that just came out of nowhere and were great, right? So the ability to do that is still there. It's not at the same level because scouting is definitely better than it was 20 years ago. I would say it's more comprehensive than it was 20 years ago. More global than it was 20 years ago as well. And so these diamonds in the rough, sorry, not roughs. It's like last night I heard Brian Hayward say roll of the dices, and I'm like, what? Dices? No, rolls of the dice. You can't eat plural of dice is dice. Anyway, if you heard that, right? Exactly. I'm sure I wasn't the only one that caught it. But Harvey-Pinard is an example of, those players you can find late in the draft, and if you do your right scouting, ends up being a pretty good player. And Harvey-Pinard, who else could he play with other than Montreal with a last name like that? Exactly. The really French-sounding last names should immediately be Montreal Canadiens. I think, they used to have the rights to, anybody out of Quebec way, way, way back in the original 6 era. I'm not saying to go back to that, but if the name sounds really, really French, put him in Montreal. That's automatic. Absolutely. His last name's Beliveau? Well, he has to be a Montreal Canadian. I don't care who's drafted him. He has to be a Montreal Canadian. Cournoyer? Yeah. Any name like that absolutely has to be. So Minnesota yesterday became first in the division in the Central. They've been, just driving their way up. And as I've said too, the amount of negativity thrown towards Minnesota because the Minnesota Wild is there. And I get it. The funny thing is, I don't think they had their best week. I think they were outplayed by New Jersey. Gustafsson steals them a win there. One that he didn't even get into the 3 stars. So, like yesterday, they were talking about how he was stellar against New Jersey, and I said to the TV, no, he wasn't. They didn't make him one of the 3 stars. But they're going to be tested. Tomorrow they host Seattle. Seattle showed against Nashville what they can do. And then they're at Colorado on Wednesday. So if we really want an idea of where Minnesota stands in relation to the Colorado Avalanche, we're going to get a good idea of that on Wednesday. I will say this. They're getting points without Kaprizov. That's impressive and important. And they're playing some good hockey, and they're getting excellent goaltending. So their special teams, their penalty kill on and off here and there, good lately. But they're getting points, they're getting wins, and they're doing it without their best player. So I really think that we're going to see the Minnesota Wild potentially end up winning that division, which would be odd. Because just on the face of it, and I haven't looked at it, I'm thinking, when was the last time they won a division? And I think for the team, I think this could be great. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like, for instance, Minnesota, where do they stand in terms of contenders in the West? Would they be a team that gets knocked out early? Are they a team that could go all the way to the Stanley Cup final? They have not been as far as the conference final since 2003. It would be nice to see them go on a bit of a run again. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.